Hello, and welcome back to Who Knew. In today's video, we're going to take a look at some of the strangest and scariest sleep disorders out there. So let's get started. Imagine you and your partner are at the happiest place on earth, Universal Studios Islands of Adventure. After a long day of rides, junk food, and of course standing in line, you head back to the hotel for a brief nap before the evening's firework display. You lay down to catch some shut-eye. All of a sudden, you're jolted awake by the sound of someone at the door. At first, it seemed as though they're just trying to test the handle, but then it gets a little more aggressive. Panicked, you dart your eyes towards the door, only to find that it's not someone trying to get in, but your partner trying to get out. Before you can even make heads or tails of the situation though, they stop, turn around and return to bed. Naturally, your chances of getting back to sleep are shattered, and when you confront them about it later, they think you're having a laugh. What you just experienced firsthand was a classic case of sleepwalking. Now, according to sleepfoundation.org, sleepwalking, formerly known as somnambulism, is a behavior disorder that originates during deep sleep and results in walking or performing other complex behaviors while still mostly asleep. Actions of people who have been known to sleepwalk can range from just sitting up in bed mumbling to themselves all the way to performing normal everyday routines such as getting dressed. Of course, the image of someone sleepwalking may remind you of Will Ferrell stuffing pillows into the oven. However, to the individuals who suffer and their family members, it can be quite scary. Sleepwalking itself isn't innately dangerous. You aren't messing up any of your bodily systems. It is the actions that are done during an episode that can lead to harm, either to the individual themselves or others around them. Take our previous story. What could have happened if they'd actually gotten out of the room, even walked out of the hotel and into the street, or come across unsavory characters? It is the what-ifs of sleepwalking that can make this sleep disorder the one to watch out for. Take Scott Falatta, who in the year 2000 was sentenced to prison for murdering his wife. His defense? You guessed it, sleepwalking. The question wasn't whether or not Scott had committed the crime, but whether he was aware of his actions at the time. Scott claims he has no memory of the incident, and his defense had sleep experts digging into his family's apparent history of sleepwalking. It was suggested that stress and lack of sleep could also have led to the sleepwalking incident. Now this of course is an extreme example, but there are many accounts of people either waking themselves up or being woken up moments before they do something that could potentially harm themselves or others. Of course, sleepwalking is one of the better known disorders. When it comes to the human brain and its relationship to sleep, there are a few more lesser known but equally fascinating conditions. It's happened to all of us at some point. You've had a long week and finally you have the chance to enjoy a lie-in. When you do finally find the motivation to get up, usually to pee or take the dog out, you're shocked to find that it's noon already and you've wasted half the day. But imagine waking up and realising you didn't just sleep in, but you've actually slept for over 20 hours. What if it wasn't just one day, but an entire week, or even several weeks in a row? If this is you, it means you're experiencing Kleine-Levin syndrome, otherwise known as Sleeping Beauty syndrome. This sleep disorder is extremely rare and affects primarily young men who, during an episode, can sleep anywhere from 12 to 24 hours a day. These bouts can last anywhere from a couple of days in a row to weeks at a time. During the episode, it is extremely difficult to wake the individual, and when they finally do wake, their bodies are making up for lost time. This results in excessive and erratic behaviour, with side effects ranging from binge eating to hallucinations. Unfortunately for those who suffer with this condition, very little is known about the disorder. It's believed that there might be hereditary factors, and that symptoms of the disorder correlate with a malfunction in the brain that regulates normal bodily functions. There has also been studies which have found that individuals who had an episode had previously suffered from an infection, leading scientists to consider that this could be partly the body's autoimmune system malfunctioning. Currently, there is no cure, but every individual who suffers from Kleine-Levin syndrome is introduced to a different treatment based on the severity of their symptoms. What makes this particularly scary for sufferers is that they will lose copious amounts of time from their life. This can add additional stress to an already distraught person, knowing that they're missing out on education, sports, social events, and even relationships. For most though, there's no need to worry. As we've already said, this condition is extremely rare. So if your teenager is sleeping in too much, the best cure may just be a swift kick up the arse. Next up, we have sleep paralysis, which stems from our REM cycle. REM stands for rapid eye movement, and it's part of our sleep cycle where our brain activity jumps to levels where it mirrors us being awake. At this point, we experience dreams, and as a side effect, our eyes flicker or dart around, thus giving REM its name. To protect ourselves, our muscles enter a state of paralysis which prevents us from acting out the physical activities we're experiencing in the dream. Dogs have this too, but to a lesser extent. This is why your pup might bark or simulate running while they're napping. How adorable. However, with us, this can malfunction with some terrifying results. Essentially, a person wakes up during their REM cycle while their muscles are still paralyzed. They're completely aware of their surroundings, but are unable to speak or even move. To make matters worse, the brain is still somewhat in sleep mode. This can lead to about 75% of those who experience sleep paralysis suffering from hallucinations too. Likely due to the combination of paralysis and hallucinations, it is no wonder many individuals report intense feelings of panic, shortness of breath, and overall dread. A common experience is the feeling that something or someone is sitting on a person's chest, possibly holding them down and preventing them from breathing. Skeptics around the world attribute many alleged experiences to this condition. Alien abductions, visits from angels and ghosts. Many of these share identical symptoms to that of sleep paralysis. If you've seen our other video on the Fermi paradox, you'll know that Earth's probably not being visited by aliens. Plus, there's no such thing as a supernatural. It's easy to make light and explain these experiences away, but it is important to remember that to the sufferer, the hallucinations were very real. Although sleep paralysis can be one of the more terrifying disorders out there, it's actually pretty harmless physically. The individuals will regain movements of their limbs seconds or at most minutes after they first wake. Trying to get back to sleep after such a terrifying episode though, that's a different story. Hence those who experience sleep paralysis are more affected mentally, with stress, anxiety and even PTSD leading to sleep deprivation. As with many other sleeping disorders, doctors have not been able to pinpoint the exact cause of sleep paralysis, but conclude that those who experience other sleep disorders are more likely to have an episode. Our final terrifying sleep disorder is what's known as exploding head syndrome. Now this might seem like something from science fiction, but it is a very real and documented phenomenon. Before we go any further though, it's important to set the record straight. This condition's name is of course not literal. For one, if it were, there'd not be much to study and would likely be reported on way more than it is. In reality, it's a disorder where people experience auditory hallucinations right as they begin to fall asleep, or just after. These loud noises have been described as anything from the sound of a door slamming, to gunshots, yelling, bombs exploding, or even cymbals clashing. With some individuals who experience exploding head syndrome, hallucinations such as bright flashes of light also accompany the noise. As terrifying as it might be to suddenly hear a bomb going off right outside while you're trying to relax, similar to many other sleep disorders, the episodes themselves are mostly painless. Most sufferers feel the same sense of stress and anxiety which leads to sleep deprivation, fearing or fighting the urge to fall asleep, terrified of what might happen the moment you close your eyes. As with most sleep disorders, there isn't a known cure to this condition. People who experience this are treated based on other symptoms in their lives, rather than the disorder itself. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to hit those buttons down below, it really does help. And if you have any ideas for future videos, leave a comment and we'll see what we can do. Otherwise, until next time, I'm off to bed.